Next up on Man vs. Pixels, I've been playing Divinity Original Sin 2. Divinity Original Sin 2 is an RPG with turn-based combat. It's made by Larian Studios, published and developed by Larian Studios, and it was out in 2017. So let's get into it. This is a top-tier RPG. Up there with the best, up there with Witcher 3, Skyrim, all of the top tier fantasy RPGs. This is up there with them. It's done perfectly as this kind of party RPG, harking back to the Baldur's Gate sort of style of isometric kind of top down point of view, controlling your main character and party of characters that you've picked up along the way. But you have to put in some work. You have to put in a bit of effort and time of your own to really get the most out of it, to really work out the best way to play it and get through, just to get through it, really. I mean, if you're not paying attention, if you're half-arsing it, if you're not looking at your gear and where you're spending your ability points and everything, you won't get through it. You'll be getting slaughtered in every fight. So yeah, you need to put into some work, but if you do, it's an absolute beast of an RPG to play. Character creation is fairly deep, not so much in the looks. Yeah, you've got a few characters to pick from. There's origin characters, which are like the pre-made characters, but you can change quite a lot about them, but they have their own backstory and their own voice acted dialogue and everything. I'd advise playing one of those to get the most out of it your first time through, because like I said, they've all got their backstories and they all have impact in the world and come with their own special quests and their own special story. So one of those origin characters is probably the best character to play. I played the dwarf called Beast, but you can change quite a lot about them. You can change a lot about their appearance, different heads, hairstyles, beards, skin tones and all that. But the most time I spent on the character creation was thinking about what kind of class the character is going to be. Now there are some predefined classes, but again, even with those, they come with starting abilities that you can completely change. So you can pick warrior, ranger, rogue, various different variations on the classic fantasy archetypes. But you can change the starting skills of each of them. It doesn't matter. You could pick cleric, but you can make it 100% healer, or a magic cleric, or a melee cleric. There's a lot of different choices to make, and you consider how that's going to fit into a 4-player party, what role you're going to want to fulfill in that party, what you're going to have your other members of the party doing. So yeah, there's a lot to think about in the character creation in terms of your abilities and your skills. And that could take quite a while if you want to get deeply into it. If you really want to get deeply into it, there's plenty of stuff on YouTube now, build guides and character creation guides that you can look at before you start playing if you want to sort of go through and create like more of a perfect build. Or if not, just wing it and do whatever you feel like, because you do get the opportunity fairly early in the game to be able to respec at will, so you don't have to dwell on it too long if you don't want to, but it is important to go later in the game to have a decent build to be able to get through some of the fights. The exploration of the environment is always fun. You never really know what's going to crop up. It's not obvious when you walk into a town who you should talk to and stuff. There's no yellow exclamation marks over people's heads to denote who could give you a quest or who could give you information and things like that. Generally, any townspeople that have like a specific name rather than just, villager or farmer, if they have like a specific name, then they're worth talking to, and they might be able to give you a quest or some information. Trading is kind of different as well. There are some obvious traders that are standing outside of stalls and things, but pretty much anyone you can talk to in the dialogue option box has an icon for their inventory, and you can click on that and see what they've got, available to buy, and you can sell stuff to them as well, up to like how they have like a supply of gold that they have to buy things. But the trading is kind of done like that. It's not always. It's always worth checking people's inventories while you're talking to them, because some random person you talk to who's not an obvious trader might have some really cool stuff to buy, or might have a large supply of gold for which you can sell your surplus gear to. Um, the environment in like the world is, again, you don't know what's around the next corner. It's not always obvious. Suddenly you can walk into a fight that you had no idea was coming, some like wild animals, wild creatures and stuff. So it's always worth saving pretty regularly. The quests are all proper story quests as well. There's no just go and kill X of this or gather Y of that quests. They're all properly storied quests that all have a reason to exist within the narrative of the game, either the main story or quite deep side quests and quests of characters in the party, or just random quests from people that still have a story and a background behind them and a reason for you to be doing them. The combat is turn-based and difficult. It's one of those games where you really can't expect to win every fight the first time you do it, especially if it's a proper tough fight with a main character or a group of baddies that are outnumbering you by quite a lot. Crowd control is essential. You can't just stand there and let every one of the enemies do damage to you. You have to try and get enemies crowd controlled as soon as possible. And positioning is important. You can't have your squishies, your ranged characters taking huge amounts of like melee damage. You've got a position important, which again is why you can't expect to win every fight the first time. Don't get disheartened if you get into a fight and you get killed because you didn't know it was coming. When you know it's coming, you can start positioning your characters a little bit in advance. You can get your ranged characters on the back, on some high ground maybe if it's available, and then start the fight in a better situation. No shame in that. That's what the savers and loads are for. The combat is difficult, and the tactics do require you to think about what kind of abilities your enemies are going to do and how you can counter those. Again, there's lots of guides and things on YouTube if you do find yourself in a tough fight that you can't beat. It could be because you're under geared or out leveled, and it might just be a fight you have to come back to at a later stage. I found myself in that situation numerous times. You try a fight a few times and they can feel impossible, and occasionally they will be impossible for the gear level or the character level you're at. Even fighting baddies 2 levels higher than you is very difficult, and an encounter with a bunch of baddies 3 levels higher than you is probably going to be impossible, and you get to see that as well when you start out leveling the baddies. You absolutely mince baddies, creatures that are like 2 levels below you, so you sort of realise, well, that's what was happening to me 2 levels ago. So yeah, combat is difficult, but it's fair. There's always a way to do it. Fights that can seem impossible can become an absolute breeze once you're of equal level, once you have better gear, or once you start using the necessary tactics to exploit the enemy's weaknesses and keep your own characters safe. So definitely worth, let's say, it's part of the work that you have to put in looking into the combat, either just examining what's going on during a fight, examining your enemy's weaknesses and your strengths and weaknesses, or going to YouTube. And don't be afraid to do it. Go to YouTube to look for some strategy guides for just general character builds and strategy guides for specific combat encounters, because there are some tough ones out there. The voice acting and dialogue is all really good. All the main characters and quest dialogue and everything is voice acted. There's a narrator that's voice acted as well. There's stuff to read too, but it's all voice acted. All the dialogue is voice acted as well, and there's a bit of extra stuff in the way of books and letters and journals and that to read for some background story. So all in all, it's a very old school party RPG. Or not, you don't have to play it in a party. That's another thing. You can play solo. You can play just your main character. For that, you have to pick up a talent called Lone Wolf, which basically doubles the ability points and stat points in that you get, and tones down the number of enemies that you encounter in combat. You can do that in either a single or a duo party, or you can play in a full party of 3 or 4. 4 is the maximum party number you can get. Yeah, very, very old school in that way. Very little hand holding, very little leading you by the nose to where you've got to go. I mean, there are sort of markers that get put in the map to show you sort of the locations of certain quests, but it is up to you to find what to do when you get there. You have to put in a bit of work and a bit of time. Go to the guides if you need to, but overall, it's a massively rewarding RPG. Highly, highly recommended. Like I said, top tier RPG, and one of the best that you can play right now. So that was Divinity Original Sin 2. Thanks for watching.